The apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibilities when I first walked through the door. It was a modest two-bedroom in the heart of Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, with hardwood floors that creaked in just the right way and windows that let in the kind of golden afternoon light that made everything look like it belonged in a magazine. I stood in the empty living room, my footsteps echoing against the bare walls, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. "So, what do you think?" My real estate agent, Patricia, stood by the kitchen counter with her tablet, already pulling up the lease agreement. "It's within your budget, close to your office, and the landlord says he's flexible on the move-in date." I walked over to the window and looked out at the street below. People were going about their lives, walking dogs, carrying groceries, laughing with friends. Normal, everyday things that felt foreign to me after the year I'd had. "I'll take it," I said, turning back to her, "but I'll need a roommate. There's no way I can afford this place on my own." Patricia nodded, unsurprised. "The landlord mentioned that. He said most tenants in this building have roommates. I can send you some resources for finding someone, or," she paused, glancing at her tablet. "Actually, there's already someone looking. Another tenant in the building recommended him. Let me pull up his information." That's how I first learned about Marcus Chen. According to the brief profile Patricia showed me, Marcus was 28 years old, worked as a software engineer at one of the tech companies downtown, and was described by the Mutual Connection as quiet, clean, and reliable. There was a photo, a professional headshot that showed a man with dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and serious eyes behind black-rimmed glasses. He looked like someone who took life seriously, which was exactly what I needed. No drama, no complications. Just someone to split the rent with. "He's looking to move in as soon as possible," Patricia said. "His current lease is ending next week. I can set up a meeting if you're interested." I looked at the photo again. Something about his expression, reserved but not unfriendly, felt trustworthy. "Set it up," I said. 3 days later, I met Marcus Chen at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the apartment. I arrived early, ordering a black coffee and claiming a table by the window where I could watch for him. I dressed casually but carefully, jeans and a button-down shirt that my sister had once told me brought out the green in my eyes. I wasn't trying to impress him exactly, but first impressions mattered, especially when you were going to be living with someone. I was scrolling through my phone when I heard someone clear their throat. "Jamie." I looked up and there he was, Marcus Chen, somehow even more striking in person than in his photo. He was taller than I'd expected, maybe 6 feet, with broad shoulders under a simple gray sweater. His dark hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it, and when he took off his sunglasses, I saw that his eyes were a warm brown that softened his otherwise serious expression. "Marcus," I said, standing up and extending my hand. His grip was firm, his palm warm. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course." His voice was deeper than I'd anticipated, with a slight rasp that suggested either late nights or early mornings. "Patricia said you're looking at the place on Pine Street." "I already signed the lease, actually. I'm moving in next week, but I need someone to split the rent with, and Patricia said you might be interested." We sat down, and for the next hour, we talked. Or rather, we conducted what felt like the world's strangest job interview, each of us trying to figure out if the other was someone we could live with. Marcus was methodical in his questions. "Do you smoke?" "No." "Drink?" "Socially, maybe a beer or 2 on the weekends." "You?" "Same. Are you a morning person or a night person?" "Morning. I usually wake up around 6, hit the gym before work." He nodded, making a mental note. "I'm more of a night owl. I usually work late, sometimes from home. I hope that won't be a problem." "As long as you're not loud, we should be fine." We went through the logistics: bills, cleaning schedules, guests, kitchen usage. Marcus was practical and straightforward, which I appreciated. There was no small talk, no attempt to be overly friendly. It was purely transactional, which was exactly what I wanted. But there was something else too, something I couldn't quite name, a kind of electricity in the air between us that had nothing to do with the fluorescent lights overhead. I found myself noticing small things about him: the way he wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, the slight furrow between his eyebrows when he was thinking, the unexpected warmth of his rare smiles. "So," he said finally, leaning back in his chair, "what's your story? Why Seattle? Why now?" It was the first personal question he'd asked, and I hesitated. I'd prepared an answer for this, a neat little summary that glossed over the messy truth. But something about the way Marcus was looking at me, patient, genuinely curious, made me want to be honest. "I needed a fresh start," I said. "I was in Portland before this, had a job I didn't love, a relationship that fell apart, and an apartment full of memories I didn't want anymore. A friend told me about a position opening up at his marketing firm here in Seattle, and I thought, why not? Sometimes you just need to burn everything down and start over. Marcus nodded slowly, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, recognition, maybe, or understanding. I get that, he said quietly. Sometimes starting over is the only way forward. What about you? I asked. What's your story? He took a sip of his coffee, considering. Not as dramatic as yours. I've been in Seattle for 5 years now, working at the same company. My last living situation just ran its course. My previous roommate got married and moved in with his wife, so I'm looking for something new, something simpler. There was more to it than that. I could tell by the careful way he chose his words, but I didn't push. We just met, after all. We had time. So, Marcus said, setting down his cup, do you want to do this, roommates? I studied him for a moment, weighing the decision. On paper, he was perfect, responsible, employed, quiet, but there was something else, that same undercurrent I'd felt from the moment he'd walked in. It wasn't attraction exactly, or at least that's what I told myself. It was more like recognition, the sense that Marcus Chen was someone who might actually understand what it meant to need to start over. Yeah, I said, extending my hand again, let's do it. His handshake was just as firm as before, but this time it felt like more than a formality. It felt like the beginning of something. Moving day arrived with typical Seattle weather, overcast and threatening rain, but never quite delivering. Marcus showed up at 8 in the morning with a U-Haul truck and 2 friends who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I'd hired movers for my stuff, which was already inside, but I went down to help anyway. Jamie, this is Daniel and Josh, Marcus said, gesturing to his friends. Daniel was short and stocky with a friendly face, while Josh was tall and lean with an arm full of tattoos. The famous roommate, Daniel said, grinning. Marcus hasn't shut up about you. Daniel, Marcus said, his tone warning. What? I'm just saying you've been very thorough in your vetting process. It's like you were hearing for the CIA. I laughed despite myself. I appreciate thoroughness, it's a good quality in a roommate. We spent the next few hours hauling boxes and furniture up the stairs. The building didn't have an elevator, which meant everything had to be carried up 3 flights. By the time we'd finished, all 4 of us were sweating and exhausted. Pizza, I suggested, pulling out my phone. My treat as a thank you. Now you're speaking my language, Josh said. We ordered 3 large pizzas and sat on the floor of the living room since we hadn't set up any furniture yet. Boxes were stacked against every wall and the apartment looked like a disaster zone, but there was something satisfying about it. This was mine, ours, a blank slate. So, Jamie, Daniel said, reaching for another slice. What's your deal? Marcus said, you're in marketing. Yeah, I work for a firm downtown. We do campaigns for tech companies mostly. It's fine, pays the bills. Sounds thrilling, Josh said dryly. It has its moments. What about you guys? Daniel worked in finance and Josh was a tattoo artist with his own shop in Fremont. They'd all been friends since college, apparently, and the easy banter between them made me feel oddly left out. Not excluded exactly, but aware that I was the outsider here. The new addition to an established group. Marcus must have noticed because he caught my eye and gave me a small smile. It was the kind of smile that said, don't worry, you'll fit in, and somehow, coming from him, I believed it. After Daniel and Josh left, Marcus and I stood in the middle of the living room, surveying the chaos. We should probably figure out where everything goes, Marcus said. Probably, I agreed, but neither of us moved. The exhaustion of the day had settled over us like a blanket, and the thought of unpacking even one more box felt insurmountable. Or, I said, we could order a couple of beers, sit on the couch once we figure out which box it's in, and call it a night. Marcus laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. Best idea I've heard all day. We found the couch cushions in one of my boxes and the beer in Marcus's mini fridge. We set everything up in a rough approximation of a living room and collapsed onto the couch, cracking open our bottles. To new beginnings, Marcus said, holding up his beer. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our beers and watching the evening light fade from the windows. It was the kind of moment that felt significant somehow, like we were standing on the edge of something important without knowing what it was. Hey Jamie, Marcus said after a while. Yes. Thanks for taking a chance on me. I know we don't really know each other yet, but I think this is going to work out. I looked over at him at the sincerity in his expression and felt that strange flutter in my chest again. I think so too, I said. And I meant it. The first few weeks of living with Marcus were surprisingly easy. We fell into a rhythm without much discussion, like dancers who instinctively knew each other's steps. I'd wake up at 6, go for a run or hit the gym, and be showered and dressed by the time Marcus stumbled out of his room around 8:30. We'd exchange brief pleasantries, coffees made, thanks, then go our separate ways. In the evenings, I'd usually get home first around 6 and I'd start making dinner. Not because I particularly loved cooking, but because it gave me something to do with my hands, a way to decompress after a day of dealing with demanding clients and impossible deadlines. Marcus would wander in around 7 or 8, sometimes earlier if he decided to work from home, and we'd eat together at the small dining table we'd set up by the window. Those dinners became my favorite part of the day. At first, our conversations were surface level. We talked about work, about the city, about the weird neighbors in 2B who seemed to have a different argument every night. But gradually, we started going deeper. Marcus told me about growing up in San Francisco, the middle child in a family of overachievers. His older sister was a doctor, his younger brother a lawyer, and Marcus had always felt like the boring one, even though he'd graduated top of his class from Stanford and now made more money than most people our age could dream of. But it's not about the money, he said one night, pushing his rice around his plate. It's about, I don't know, making something that matters. Most of what I do is just maintaining systems, fixing bugs. It's not exactly changing the world. Does work have to change the world? I asked. Sometimes it's enough that it pays for the life you want to live. He looked up at me, something unreadable in his expression. Is that what your work does for you, pays for the life you want? I thought about it. My job was fine, good even by most standards, but did it make me happy? I'm working on figuring out what life I want, I admitted. The last few years have been complicated. I'm still figuring out who I am without all the things I used to define myself by. Marcus nodded slowly. Your ex. Among other things. He didn't push, which I appreciated. Instead, he told me about his own complicated history, a serious relationship that had ended badly 2 years ago, a string of meaningless dates since then, and a growing sense that maybe he was meant to be alone. That's depressing, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Is it, or is it just realistic? He took a sip of his wine. Not everyone finds their person, that's okay. You're 28, not 80, you've got time. Maybe, but he didn't sound convinced. I wanted to argue with him, to tell him that of course he'd find someone, that anyone would be lucky to have him. But I caught myself, surprised by the vehemence of my own thoughts. Why did I care so much? Marcus was my roommate, not my responsibility. Still, as the weeks passed, I found myself thinking about him more and more. Little things would remind me of him throughout the day, a joke I wanted to share, an article I thought he'd find interesting, a restaurant I wanted to try. I'd catch myself checking my phone to see if he'd texted, feeling a small thrill when he had. It was just friendship, I told myself. I'd been so isolated in Portland, so wrapped up in a relationship that had slowly strangled me, that I'd forgotten what it was like to have a real connection with someone. That's all this was. But then there was the night everything shifted. It was a Friday in late October and Seattle was living up to its rainy reputation. I'd gotten caught in a downpour on my way home from work, and by the time I made it to our apartment, I was soaked through and shivering. Marcus was already home, sitting on the couch with his laptop, but he looked up when I walked in. Jesus, Jamie, you look like you fell in the sound. Forgot my umbrella, I said through chattering teeth. It's fine. It's not fine, you're dripping all over the floor. Go take a hot shower before you get hypothermia. I wanted to argue, but he was right. I was freezing. So I grabbed some dry clothes and headed for the bathroom, standing under the hot water until I could feel my fingers again. When I emerged 20 minutes later, the apartment smelled amazing. I found Marcus in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. What's all this? I asked. Chicken soup, he said, not looking up. My mom's recipe, it's basically medicinal. Marcus, you didn't have to. I wanted to. Now sit down and let me take care of you for once. There was something in his voice, an intensity that caught me off guard. I sat at the dining table and watched as he ladled soup into a bowl, sliced some bread and brought it all over with a glass of water. Eat, he commanded. I ate, and he was right. The soup was incredible. Rich and savory with ginger and garlic and something else I couldn't quite identify. It warmed me from the inside out. This is amazing, I said. Where have you been hiding these cooking skills? He shrugged, sitting down across from me with his own bowl. I don't cook much, it's more fun when it's for someone else. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the rain pattering against the windows. I felt myself relaxing, the tension of the week melting away. This was nice, more than nice. It felt like home. Hey Jamie, Marcus said suddenly, can I ask you something? Sure. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Your ex in Portland, what happened? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I've been wondering. I set down my spoon, considering how much to share. But Marcus had been nothing but kind to me, and I felt like I owed him honesty. His name was Eric, I said. We were together for 3 years, and for a long time I thought he was it, the person I was going to spend my life with. But looking back, I can see that I was doing all the work. I was the one compromising, changing, trying to be what he needed, and it still wasn't enough. What happened? Marcus asked gently. I found out he'd been cheating on me for months, apparently, with multiple people. The words came out flat, emotionless. I'd told this story enough times that it had lost its power to hurt me, or so I thought. But sitting across from Marcus, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, I felt the old wound crack open just a little. I'm sorry, Marcus said. That's God, Jamie, I'm so sorry. It's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but I'm okay, or I'm getting there anyway. That's why I came to Seattle. Fresh start, new city, new life. No more Eric, no more pretending to be someone I'm not. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was a simple gesture meant to be comforting, but the moment his skin touched mine, something electric passed between us. I saw his eyes widen slightly, felt him start to pull away, but then his fingers tightened around mine. We sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped across the table, the rain creating a cocoon of sound around us. My heart was pounding and I couldn't quite catch my breath. What was happening? Jamie, Marcus said softly. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled his hand away, grabbing his phone and glancing at the screen. Sorry, it's work, I need to take this. He stood up and walked into his room, leaving me sitting at the table, my hand still tingling where he'd touched me. What the hell was that? After that night, things were different between us. Not bad exactly, but charged with a tension that hadn't been there before. We were both hyper-aware of each other, careful about physical contact, awkward in ways we hadn't been since the first day we met. I tried to convince myself that I'd imagined the moment, that it had been nothing more than two friends sharing a vulnerable conversation. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way Marcus had looked at me, the way his hand had felt in mine, the electricity that had sparked between us. And I couldn't stop noticing things about him that I'd been determinedly ignoring before. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strength in his hands as he chopped vegetables, the way he'd absently run his fingers through his hair when he was concentrating, leaving it adorably messy, the sound of his laugh, rare but genuine, the way he looked first thing in the morning, rumpled and soft and utterly unlike the polished professional he presented to the world. I was in trouble. Because the thing was, I'd known I was gay since I was 16 years old. I'd come out to my family in college, weathered the storm of my father's disappointment and my mother's tears, and eventually found acceptance. I'd dated men, slept with men, loved men. My sexuality wasn't something I was confused about or struggling with. What I was struggling with was the realization that I was attracted to my roommate, my straight roommate, who had never given any indication that he was anything other than heterosexual. My roommate, who I had to see every single day, who I'd signed a year-long lease with. I was screwed. I tried to create distance. I started working later, going to the gym twice a day, making plans with coworkers I barely knew, anything to avoid being alone with Marcus in the apartment. But it didn't help. If anything, it made things worse because absence didn't make the heart grow fonder, it made it grow desperate. Marcus noticed, of course. He wasn't an idiot. Are you avoiding me? He asked one night, cornering me as I tried to sneak into my room after a particularly long day at work. What? No, I've just been busy. Bullshit. He crossed his arms, blocking my path. Did I do something wrong? After that night with the soup, things have been weird between us. If I said something or did something to make you uncomfortable, You didn't, I said quickly, too quickly. I promise it's not you, I'm just dealing with some stuff, personal stuff. He studied me for a long moment and I could see him trying to decide whether to push. Finally, he sighed. Okay, but Jamie, whatever it is, you can talk to me, you know that, right? We're friends. Friends, right, that's what we were. I know, I said, thanks, Marcus. He stepped aside, letting me pass, but I could feel his eyes on me as I closed my bedroom door. I leaned against the door and closed my eyes, my heart racing. This was getting out of hand. I needed to get over this stupid crush before I ruined the best living situation I'd ever had. But how do you stop wanting something when you see it every single day? November arrived with crisp, cold mornings and the kind of darkness that made 5 p.m. feel like midnight. The holidays were approaching, and with them came an onslaught of office parties, client dinners, and social obligations that I normally would have dreaded. But this year, I threw myself into them with enthusiasm, grateful for any excuse to not be home. Marcus seemed to be doing the same thing. Our schedules became misaligned. He'd be home when I was out, I'd be home when he was gone. We communicated mostly through sticky notes left on the fridge and brief text exchanges about bills and groceries. The easy intimacy we'd built over those first few months evaporated, replaced by a polite distance that felt worse than being strangers. I told myself it was for the best, that this was what I needed to get over my inconvenient feelings, but I was miserable and I could tell Marcus was too. The apartment felt empty even when we were both there, like a house instead of a home. Things came to a head the week before Thanksgiving. I'd been invited to 3 different Thanksgiving dinners, one with coworkers, one with my college roommate's family, and one with my sister who lived in Portland with her husband and 2 kids. I'd been planning to go to my sister's to spend the long weekend surrounded by family and forced normalcy. But 2 days before I was supposed to leave, she called to tell me that both kids had come down with the flu, and it would probably be better if I didn't come. I'm so sorry, Jamie, she said, sounding genuinely distressed. I know you were looking forward to this. It's okay, I lied. I hope the kids feel better. I hung up and stared at my phone, feeling utterly lost. The thought of spending Thanksgiving alone in the apartment, or worse, at some coworker's pity dinner, made me want to curl up and never leave my room. I was still sitting on my bed wallowing when I heard a knock on my door. Jamie, you okay? Marcus, of course. Yeah, fine, I called back. Can I come in? I hesitated, then got up and opened the door. Marcus was standing there in sweatpants and an old Stanford t-shirt, looking concerned. I heard you on the phone, he said. Is everything okay with your sister? Kids are sick, Thanksgiving's canceled. Shit, I'm sorry, he paused. What are you going to do? I don't know, find a soup kitchen to volunteer at maybe, lean into the pathetic single guy stereotype. Marcus's expression softened. Come with me. What? To San Francisco, for Thanksgiving, come with me. I stared at him. Marcus, I can't crash your family's Thanksgiving. You're not crashing, I'm inviting you, and trust me, my family always makes enough food for 20 people even when there's only 6 of us. My mom will be thrilled. She's always complaining that I don't bring anyone home. I don't know. Please, he looked at me with those earnest brown eyes and I felt my resistance crumbling. I don't want you to be alone on Thanksgiving, and honestly, I could use the moral support. My sister's going to bring her new boyfriend and my brother's going to spend the entire weekend lecturing me about my career choices. You'd be doing me a favor. That was what convinced me, not the prospect of a home-cooked meal or meeting his family, but the idea that Marcus needed me there, that I could be useful to him in some way. Okay, I said, if you're sure. His face lit up with a smile that made my chest ache. I'm sure. We'll leave Wednesday morning, road trip. Road trip, I agreed. We left early Wednesday morning, Marcus's car loaded with our overnight bags and several pies he'd insisted on baking the night before. The drive to San Francisco was about 12 hours, and we'd planned to stop halfway in southern Oregon for lunch and to stretch our legs. For the first hour, we drove in comfortable silence, watching Seattle disappear in the rearview mirror as the landscape shifted from urban sprawl to dense forests. Marcus had put together a playlist, an eclectic mix of indie rock, old soul, and what could only be described as guilty pleasure pop. When a Taylor Swift song came on, I looked over at him in surprise. What? He said defensively. She's a good songwriter. I didn't say anything. You were judging me, I could feel it. I wasn't judging, I was appreciating your taste in music. There's a difference. He grinned, and just like that, the tension that had been between us for weeks seemed to evaporate. We sang along to the playlist, badly, enthusiastically, and told stories about our most embarrassing moments, our worst dates, our secret dreams. It felt like going back in time to those early weeks when everything between us had been easy and uncomplicated. Except it wasn't uncomplicated anymore, at least not for me. I found myself watching Marcus as he drove. The way the sunlight streaming through the windshield brought out the gold undertones in his skin, the way his long fingers drummed against the steering wheel in time to the music. I wanted to reach over and touch him, to thread my fingers through his, to close the distance between us. Instead, I looked out the window and tried to remember all the reasons why that was a terrible idea. We stopped for lunch at a diner in Ashland, sliding into a cracked vinyl booth and ordering burgers and fries. Marcus stole fries off my plate and I retaliated by taking a bite of his burger. It was domestic and familiar and entirely too comfortable. So I said, trying to distract myself, "Tell me about your family, what should I expect?" Marcus leaned back in his seat considering. "My mom's going to love you, she's warm and welcoming and will probably try to feed you until you can't move. My dad's quieter but he's kind. He'll ask you a lot of questions about your work, your background. Don't take it personally, he's just genuinely curious about people." "And your siblings?" "Christine is the oldest. She's a surgeon, brilliant and intimidating and very protective of me. She'll probably grill you about your intentions." "My intentions?" Marcus's ears turned pink. "She'll want to make sure you're a good roommate, that you're not taking advantage of me or whatever." "Right, roommate." I took a long drink of water. "And your brother?" "David's a corporate lawyer. He's intense, very type A, always has to be the smartest person in the room. We don't always see eye to eye, but we're working on it." "Sounds like a fun Thanksgiving." Marcus laughed. "It's not so bad. There's usually enough food and wine to smooth over any awkwardness, and having you there will help. It'll give everyone something else to focus on besides interrogating me about my love life." The mention of his love life sent a pang through my chest, but I forced myself to smile, happy to serve as a distraction. We got back on the road, and as the miles passed, I felt myself relaxing further. Maybe this trip was exactly what we needed, a chance to reset, to remember why we'd become friends in the first place. By the time we crossed into California, I'd almost convinced myself that my feelings for Marcus were manageable, that I could do this, be his friend, his roommate, nothing more. And then we arrived at his parents' house. The Chen family home was a beautiful craftsman-style house in the Marina District, with a view of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Marcus parked on the street, and we'd barely gotten out of the car before the front door flew open and a tiny woman with gray-streaked black hair came hurrying down the walkway. "Marcus," she threw her arms around him and he bent down to hug her back, his face breaking into the kind of genuine smile I rarely saw from him. "Hi, Mom." She pulled back, holding his face in her hands and studying him intently. "You look tired. Are you eating enough, sleeping enough?" "I'm fine, Mom." She turned her attention to me and I felt suddenly self-conscious. "And you must be Jamie. Marcus has told me so much about you. Come here." Before I could react, she'd pulled me into a hug. She smelled like ginger and jasmine, and her embrace was so warm and genuine that I felt myself tearing up unexpectedly. "Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Chen," I managed. "Please call me Linda and you're always welcome here." She linked her arm through mine and started leading me toward the house. Come in, Marcus, bring the bags. Jamie, I hope you're hungry. I've been cooking for days." The house was beautiful inside, warm and lived in, with family photos covering every available surface and the smell of delicious food wafting from the kitchen. Marcus's father, a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, shook my hand firmly. His sister Christine was there with her boyfriend, a soft-spoken doctor named James. David hadn't arrived yet, apparently running late from work. Linda insisted on giving me a tour of the house, showing me to the guest room where I'd be staying and pointing out family photos along the way. There was Marcus as a chubby-cheeked baby, Marcus graduating from high school, Marcus and his siblings at various ages and stages. In every photo, he looked serious, thoughtful, like he was always thinking about something beyond the frame. "He was such a serious child," Linda said, following my gaze. "Always reading, always thinking. Sometimes I worried he was too much in his own head, but then he'd surprise us with these moments of pure joy and we'd remember that he was still just a kid. He's a good person, I said without thinking. You raised him well. Linda looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something knowing, something soft. He talks about you a lot, you know, more than he's talked about anyone in a long time. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled and followed her back downstairs. Dinner that night was a casual affair, just family and James since it wasn't the official Thanksgiving meal yet. But the food was incredible. Pot stickers and dan noodles, mapo tofu and twice-cooked pork, and about 6 other dishes that Linda kept bringing out of the kitchen. "Mom, we can't eat all this," Marcus protested. "Leftovers," she said simply. "Jamie, have some more pot stickers, you're too thin." I caught Marcus's eye across the table, and we both tried not to laugh. His family was wonderful, loud and warm and full of the kind of love that comes from years of knowing each other's best and worst qualities and loving each other anyway. I found myself relaxing, joining in the conversation, laughing at Christine's stories about ridiculous patients, and adding my own anecdotes about disastrous marketing campaigns. After dinner, Marcus and I volunteered to do the dishes while everyone else moved into the living room. We worked side by side at the sink, falling into an easy rhythm. I washed, he dried. "Your family's great," I said. "They like you, that's not something they give easily." Even Christine, I thought she was going to interrogate me. She did, you just didn't realize it. All those questions about your job and where you grew up, that was the interrogation, and you passed. I bumped my shoulder against his. I'm very interrogation resistant. I noticed. He was quiet for a moment, drying a plate with careful attention. "Thanks for coming. I know this is probably weird for you, spending Thanksgiving with a bunch of strangers." "You're not a stranger," I said, "and your family isn't either. This is. It's really nice, Marcus, thank you for including me." He looked at me and there was something in his expression that made my breath catch. Something tender and vulnerable and entirely unlike his usual carefully controlled demeanor. "Jamie, Marcus, Jamie, come in here," Linda's voice called from the living room. "We're looking at photo albums." The moment broke. Marcus set down the plate he'd been drying and led the way to the living room, where Linda had indeed pulled out what looked like dozens of photo albums. The rest of the evening was spent looking at embarrassing childhood photos, Marcus with braces and a truly unfortunate haircut, Marcus in various science fair competitions, Marcus at his high school prom with a date who Linda informed me had never been good enough for him anyway. I filed that comment away to think about later. By the time everyone headed to bed, I was exhausted but happy. I said goodnight to Marcus in the upstairs hallway, our rooms across from each other. "Sleep well," he said. "You too." I lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. I could hear Marcus moving around in his room, the creak of his bed as he settled in. We were so close, just a wall and a few feet of space between us. I thought about what Linda had said about Marcus talking about me, about the way he'd looked at me while we were doing dishes. Was I imagining things, seeing what I wanted to see? Or was it possible, just barely, impossibly possible, that Marcus might feel something for me too? Thanksgiving Day dawned bright and cold with a clarity that seemed to sharpen everything. I woke early, disoriented for a moment before remembering where I was. Marcus's childhood home, San Francisco. Light was streaming through the guest room window and I could smell coffee brewing downstairs. I pulled on jeans and a sweater and padded downstairs, following the scent to the kitchen. I found Marcus's father, Robert, sitting at the breakfast table with the newspaper and a cup of coffee. "Good morning, Jamie," he said, looking up. "Coffee, please." He poured me a cup and I sat down across from him. For a few minutes, we sat in comfortable silence, Robert reading his paper and me watching the morning light play across the bay through the kitchen window. "Linda tells me you and Marcus met through a housing search," Robert said eventually, setting down his paper. "That's right, I just moved to Seattle and needed a place. The timing worked out." "And how's that going, living with Marcus?" There was something in his tone, not judgment exactly but curiosity, like he was trying to understand something. "It's been great," I said honestly. "Marcus is a good roommate, reliable, clean, easy to talk to. I feel lucky we found each other." Robert nodded slowly. He speaks very highly of you. It's been a long time since I've heard him talk about someone the way he talks about you.
Yeah.
Before I could figure out how to respond to that, the kitchen door swung open and Marcus walked in, his hair still messy from sleep, wearing flannel pajama pants and an old t-shirt. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Good morning, son," Robert said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sleep well." Marcus poured himself coffee and sat down next to me, his knee brushed against mine under the table and he didn't move it away. "What time does the chaos start?" "Your mother wants to have dinner at 3, which means the chaos starts in about an hour when Christine arrives to help cook." Marcus groaned. "I should go shower then, before it's too late." He drained his coffee and stood up, squeezing my shoulder briefly as he passed. The casual touch sent electricity through me and I had to force myself not to react. Robert watched this exchange with those knowing eyes, and I had the distinct feeling that he saw more than I wanted him to. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. David arrived with his fiancée, a poised woman named Jennifer who worked in venture capital. Christine and James took over the kitchen with Linda, preparing an absurd amount of food. Robert set up the dining room table, extending it to fit everyone, and Marcus and I were tasked with keeping everyone's drinks filled and staying out of the way. We ended up on the back porch, supposedly on wine duty but really just escaping the chaos inside. "Your family's intense," I said, leaning against the railing. "That's one word for it." Marcus stood next to me, close enough that our arms were almost touching. "Are you sorry you came?" "Not even a little bit." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "Good." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon light sparkle on the bay. There was something building between us, a tension that was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. Every shared glance lasted a beat too long. "Jamie," Marcus said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That night with the soup, when I took your hand, did you feel—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Did something happen, or did I imagine it?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was it, the moment where I could either be honest or play it safe, protect our friendship or risk everything. "You didn't imagine it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus turned to face me fully, his eyes searching mine. "So I wasn't crazy, there was something." "There was something." Is something?" He took a breath. "Jamie, I need to tell you." "Marcus, Jamie, dinner's ready," Christine's voice rang out from inside. We both jumped, the moment shattered. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, frustration clear on his face. "We should go in," I said, even though every part of me wanted to stay on this porch and hear what Marcus had been about to say. "Yeah," he agreed, but he caught my hand as I turned to go inside, his fingers threading through mine. "Later, we'll talk later, okay?" "Okay." Dinner was a boisterous affair. The table was laden with food, turkey and stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, green beans and cranberry sauce, and about a dozen other dishes. Everyone was talking at once, sharing stories and inside jokes, filling the room with warmth and laughter. I found myself watching Marcus throughout the meal. The way he interacted with his family, teasing his sister, debating politics with his brother, helping his mother serve dishes. He was more relaxed here than I'd ever seen him, more open. This was Marcus with his guard down, and it was beautiful to witness. At one point, Linda stood and raised her glass. "I want to make a toast," she announced, and everyone quieted down. "I'm grateful for all of you being here, for this family which continues to grow," she nodded at Jennifer and James, "and for the people who make our lives richer. Jamie, we're so glad you could join us. Thank you for taking such good care of our Marcus." Everyone raised their glasses and I felt my face heat. Marcus's knee pressed against mine under the table, steady and reassuring. After dinner, while the women insisted on cleaning up and refusing all offers of help from the men, Marcus grabbed 2 beers and led me out to the back porch again. "Finally," he said, settling onto the porch swing, "I thought we'd never get a moment alone." I sat next to him, accepting the beer he offered. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. "Your mom called me family," I said, still processing that toast. "Yeah, she does that, she adopts people." Marcus took a sip of his beer. "But she meant it, she really likes you." I really like her, all of them actually. You're lucky to have a family like this. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Jamie, earlier, before we were interrupted, I was trying to tell you something. My pulse quickened. I remember. I don't really know how to say this. I've been trying to figure it out for weeks, trying to understand what I'm feeling, and I think I've been making it too complicated. He turned to face me, his expression earnest and vulnerable. I like you, Jamie, more than as a roommate, more than as a friend. I think about you all the time. When I'm at work, I'm excited to come home because you'll be there. When you started avoiding me, it felt like the sun had gone out. And I know this is probably the worst timing in the world, and I know it could complicate everything, but I needed you to know. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process what he'd just said. You like me. Yes. But I thought you were straight. Marcus laughed, a slightly bitter sound. Yeah, so did I for most of my life actually. I dated women, I had girlfriends, I never questioned it because that's what you do, right? That's what's expected. But then you moved in and something just clicked. It took me a while to understand what I was feeling, why I wanted to be around you all the time, why I got jealous when you mentioned going on dates. You were jealous. Insanely, irrationally. He ran his hand through his hair. I've spent the last month doing research, reading articles, talking to a therapist, trying to figure out if this is just a fluke, just you, or if I've been lying to myself my whole life. And I think it's both. I think I'm attracted to men, to you specifically, but probably to men in general. And I think I've been suppressing that for so long that I didn't even recognize it. I didn't know what to say. This was so far beyond what I'd imagined that I felt like I was in a dream. Say something, Marcus said, his voice uncertain. Please, even if it's to tell me I've completely misread this situation and ruined our friendship. You haven't ruined anything, I said quickly. Marcus, I like you too. I've been trying not to because I thought you were straight and I didn't want to make things weird between us. But yes, I like you so much. The relief on his face was palpable. Yeah. Yeah. We sat there for a moment, both of us processing. Then Marcus laughed, the sound full of genuine joy. So what do we do now? He asked. I have no idea, I admitted. This is uncharted territory for me. I've never been someone's. What gay awakening, is that what this is? I prefer to think of it as a late-stage self-discovery, Marcus said dryly. Sounds more dignified. I laughed, some of the tension breaking. Okay, so you're figuring out your sexuality and we both like each other, and we live together. This has disaster written all over it. Or, Marcus said, shifting closer, it could be the best thing that's ever happened to us. You're an optimist now. When it comes to you, apparently. He reached out and took my hand, threading our fingers together the way he had on that rainy night. But this time there was no interruption, no reason to pull away. We sat like that on the porch swing, holding hands and watching the last of the daylight fade, and for the first time in months I felt like everything might actually be okay. We should probably take this slow, I said eventually. Figure things out, you're still processing a lot. I know, Marcus squeezed my hand, but can we try see where this goes? I looked at him, at his earnest expression, at the hope in his eyes, at the way he was holding onto my hand like it was a lifeline. And I realized that despite all the logical reasons to be cautious, despite all the ways this could go wrong, I wanted to try. I wanted him. Yeah, I said, let's try. Marcus's smile was brighter than the sunset. Yeah. Yeah. And then, because it felt like the most natural thing in the world, I leaned in and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, our lips barely brushing. Marcus inhaled sharply, then kissed me back. His free hand coming up to cup my jaw, it was sweet and careful and absolutely perfect. When we pulled apart, Marcus was looking at me with wonder in his eyes. Wow, he breathed. Yeah, I agreed. Wow. We heard voices inside, the family starting to gather in the living room for post-dinner drinks. Reality was calling us back, but for just a moment longer we sat there on that porch swing, holding hands and smiling at each other like teenagers with a secret. Everything had changed, and somehow everything was exactly as it should be. The drive back to Seattle felt completely different from the drive down. The same car, the same route, the same playlist, but everything had shifted. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel and the other holding mine across the center console. We talked about everything and nothing, punctuated by comfortable silences that felt intimate rather than awkward. So, I said as we crossed into Oregon, how are you feeling about everything? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. Honestly, terrified, excited, confused, all of it at once. He glanced over at me. Is that normal? I think so. Coming out even to yourself is a big deal. There's no one right way to feel about it. Did you always know that you were gay? Not always. I figured it out in high school, but even then it took a while to accept it, to say it out loud. I watched the landscape blur past the window. It's different for everyone. Some people know from the time they're kids, others don't figure it out until they're adults. There's no timeline you're supposed to follow. I keep thinking about all the times I should have known, Marcus said. Looking back, there were signs, crushes on male teachers or actors that I told myself were just admiration. The way I never felt quite right with the women I dated, even when they were objectively great. I think I was just really good at not seeing what I didn't want to see. That's pretty human, I said. We're all good at that. What about your family? When you came out, how did they react? I thought about my father's face when I'd told him, the way my mother had cried. Not great at first. My dad was raised Catholic, very traditional. He took it as a personal failure, like he'd done something wrong. My mom was upset because she thought my life would be harder, but they came around eventually. It took time, but they came around. Do they know about us, about this? Marcus gestured between us. I haven't told them yet. I wanted to see what this was first before I started explaining it to my family. I squeezed his hand. What about you? Are you going to tell your family? Marcus exhaled slowly. I want to. I think they'll be okay with it. My parents are pretty progressive and Christine's best friend is a lesbian, but it still feels like a big step, and I want to be sure of what I'm saying before I say it. You don't have to rush, I said. Take your time, figure out what feels right for you. We stopped for lunch at a diner, sliding into a booth in the back. The waitress was friendly and chatty, calling us honey and refilling our coffee without being asked. When she walked away, Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. Is this okay? He asked, doing this in public. Is it okay with you? I countered. He looked around the diner at the trucker in the corner, the elderly couple by the window, the group of teenagers near the door. No one was paying any attention to us. Yeah, he said, it is. It was such a simple thing, holding hands in a diner, but it felt monumental. I could see Marcus processing it, becoming more comfortable with each passing moment. He was like someone testing out new muscles, figuring out what he was capable of. We got back on the road, and as the hours passed, Marcus asked me questions. About my first relationship, my first kiss, my worst date. I answered honestly, trying to give him a sense of what being openly gay was like, the good parts and the challenges, the freedom and the occasional discrimination. I don't want you to think I'm using you as a guidebook, Marcus said at one point. I'm genuinely curious, but I also don't want to make this all about me and my journey. You're not just a learning experience. I know that, I said, and I don't mind the questions. It's actually kind of nice being able to talk about this stuff with you. Yes. Yeah, most of the time when I'm dating someone, we skip over this part. We assume we understand each other because we're both gay, but there's actually something valuable in having to explain things, in not taking shared understanding for granted. Marcus smiled. You're very philosophical for someone who works in marketing. Marketing is all about understanding what people want and why they want it. It's basically applied psychology. Fair point. As we neared Seattle, the sky opened up in typical Pacific Northwest fashion, rain pelting the windshield in sheets. Traffic slowed to a crawl, and what should have been the last hour of the drive stretched into 2. Welcome home, Marcus said dryly as we finally pulled into our building's parking garage. We hauled our bags up the stairs and into our apartment, which felt different somehow. Or maybe we were different and the apartment was just reflecting that change back at us. I'm going to take a shower, Marcus said, dropping his bag by his bedroom door. Wash off the road grime. Good idea. We stood there for a moment, awkward again. This was our home, our space, but the rules had changed. We didn't know how to be with each other here yet. Jamie, Marcus said. Yes. After my shower, do you want to, I don't know, watch a movie or something, just hang out? I smiled. I'd like that. An hour later, we were on the couch together, a bowl of popcorn between us and some action movie playing on the TV that neither of us was really watching. We'd started out on opposite ends of the couch, but gradually we'd migrated closer until Marcus's arm was around my shoulders and I was leaning into his side. This is nice, Marcus murmured. Yes. Yeah, he pressed a kiss to the top of my head and I felt him smile against my hair. I could get used to this. We should probably talk about logistics, I said, tilting my head to look up at him. How we want to handle this, rules, boundaries, that kind of thing. Marcus nodded. You're right, we should, but he didn't move, didn't take his arm away. What are you thinking? Well, we should probably keep our relationship separate from our roommate arrangement, at least at first. Keep our bedrooms our own spaces, no pressure to change our routines. That makes sense. And we should be honest with each other. If something's not working, we say so. If we need space, we ask for it. No letting things build up until they explode. Agreed. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What about other people? Are we telling people about this, our friends, coworkers? What do you want to do? I don't know yet. I'm not ready to come out to everyone, but I don't want to hide you either. Is that okay? It's okay, I said. We can take it as it comes. Tell people as you feel comfortable. And if it doesn't work out, Marcus asked quietly, if we try this and it turns out we're better as friends, we still have 10 months left on our lease. Then we figure it out. We're both adults. We can handle an awkward living situation if we have to. I paused, but I don't think it's going to come to that. No, I think we're going to be fine. Marcus kissed me then properly this time. His lips were soft and he tasted like popcorn and possibility. When we broke apart, we were both smiling. I really like you, Jamie, Marcus said. I really like you too. We settled back into the couch, resuming our movie-watching position. Outside, the rain continued to fall, creating a cocoon of sound around our apartment. Inside, everything was warm and safe and full of potential. The next few weeks were an exercise in learning each other all over again. We fell into new routines, new patterns. Marcus would kiss me goodbye in the mornings before I left for work. I'd text him throughout the day, silly messages and memes that made him laugh. We'd have dinner together every night, then curl up on the couch or retreat to our respective bedrooms, honoring our agreement to keep our own spaces. It was slow and careful and absolutely wonderful. Marcus was thoughtful in his approach to the relationship, constantly checking in to make sure I was okay, that he wasn't moving too fast or too slow. He read articles about coming out later in life, watched documentaries about queer history, asked me a million questions about queer culture and etiquette. You don't have to become an expert overnight, I told him one night as we lay on the couch together. There's no test at the end. I know, I just want to understand, to do this right. Yeah. There is no right way to be queer, Marcus. Everyone figures it out in their own way. He was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, when did you first kiss a guy? I was 18, his name was Connor and he was in my freshman biology class. We studied together one night and at the end he just kissed me. It was terrible, all teeth and uncertainty, but also kind of perfect. My first kiss with a guy was you, Marcus said softly. On my parents' porch with the sun setting and my whole family inside. I was 30 years old and it was the first time I'd ever kissed someone and felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I turned to look at him and the expression on his face took my breath away. There was wonder there and gratitude and something deeper that I wasn't ready to name yet. That's pretty romantic, I managed. I'm a romantic apparently, who knew? I laughed and kissed him and we stayed like that for a while, trading kisses and soft touches, learning the geography of each other. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, Marcus came home from work looking troubled. I was in the kitchen making stir-fry and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. Hey, I said, bad day. Not bad exactly, just complicated. He set his bag down and came into the kitchen, wrapping his arms around me from behind and resting his chin on my shoulder. I ran into someone from college today, someone I used to date. I felt a twist of something in my gut, not quite jealousy but close. Yeah, how'd that go? It was fine, good actually. We caught up, talked about what we've been doing, and then she asked if I was seeing anyone. What did you say? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I said yes. I told her I was seeing someone, that it was new but good, and then I said he instead of she. I turned in his arms to face him. How did she react? She was surprised but cool about it, asked me a few questions, congratulated me on figuring myself out. It was not as terrifying as I thought it would be. That's great, Marcus, I'm proud of you. Yeah, he smiled, but there was something uncertain in his expression. It made me realize that I want to do this. Come out, I mean, not in some big dramatic way, but just start living openly. I don't want to hide who I am anymore. I don't want to hide you. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest. Are you sure you don't have to rush this? I'm sure, or at least I'm sure that I want to try. He cupped my face in his hands. I'm going to tell my family first, over Christmas, and then my close friends, and then we'll see, one step at a time. Okay, I said, I'm here, whatever you need. I know, he kissed me softly. That's what makes this possible, knowing you're here. Christmas approached with all its chaotic energy. The city was transformed into a wonderland of lights and decorations, and despite the cold and the rain, there was a festive energy in the air that was hard to resist. Marcus and I had both planned to go home for Christmas, him to San Francisco, me to Portland to see my sister and her family. But a few days before we were supposed to leave, Marcus came to me with a proposition. Come to San Francisco with me again, he said. For Christmas, I want you there when I tell my family. Marcus, that's a lot, are you sure? I'm sure. I don't want to do this without you, and besides, my family already loves you, it won't be weird. Your family loves me as your roommate, this is going to change things. I know, but I don't want to hide anymore, and I don't want to pretend that you're just my roommate when you're so much more than that. So once again, we loaded up Marcus's car and headed south. This time, though, there was an undercurrent of anxiety to the trip. Marcus was quiet, clearly nervous about what was coming. I tried to distract him with music and conversation, but I could see his mind was elsewhere. What if they're not okay with it? He asked as we neared San Francisco. Then we deal with it together. What if they think I'm confused or going through a phase? Then we explain that you're not, and if they don't believe us, we give them time. People usually come around. Marcus nodded, but he didn't look convinced. We arrived at the Chen house on Christmas Eve, and Linda welcomed us with the same warmth as before. But this time, I could see her looking between Marcus and me with a knowing expression. Jamie, darling, it's so good to see you again, she said, pulling me into a hug. Then she turned to Marcus and gave him a long, assessing look. You look nervous, is everything okay? Yeah, Mom, everything's fine, but I need to talk to you and Dad, and Christine and David when they get here, family meeting. Linda's expression shifted from concern to understanding. I'll make tea. An hour later, the entire Chen family was gathered in the living room. Christine and James had arrived, along with David and Jennifer. Everyone was looking at Marcus expectantly, and I could see him gathering his courage. So, he began, his voice not quite steady. I need to tell you all something important. He glanced at me, and I gave him an encouraging nod. I'm gay, Marcus said. The words came out in a rush, like he had to get them out before he lost his nerve. Or maybe bisexual, I'm still figuring out the terminology, but the point is I'm attracted to men, and I'm in a relationship with Jamie. The silence that followed felt eternal. I watched the family's reactions, Linda's gentle smile, Robert's thoughtful nod, Christine's complete lack of surprise, David's wide eyes. I know this probably comes as a shock, Marcus continued. And I know I've dated women in the past, but I've realized that I was never really happy in those relationships. I was going through the motions, doing what I thought I was supposed to do, and then Jamie moved in and everything just clicked. I started feeling things I'd never felt before, and I realized that I'd been lying to myself my whole life. Marcus, Linda said gently, breathe. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry if this is disappointing or confusing, but this is who I am. And Jamie, he reached for my hand, threading our fingers together. Jamie makes me happier than I've ever been, so this is us together. Another beat of silence, then Christine started laughing. What? Marcus said, looking defensive. I'm sorry, Christine said, wiping her eyes. It's just we all knew from Thanksgiving. You knew. Marcus, you were not subtle, David said, grinning. The way you looked at each other, the way you lit up whenever he was around. Mom literally texted me after Thanksgiving asking when you were going to figure it out. Marcus looked at Linda, who shrugged. A mother knows, and honestly, sweetie, I'm just happy you're happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you. Robert stood up and crossed to Marcus, pulling him into a tight hug. I'm proud of you, son, for being honest with yourself and with us. That takes courage. Christine was next, hugging Marcus and then me. Welcome to the family officially this time, she said to me. Take care of him, he's more fragile than he looks. Hey, Marcus protested, but he was smiling through tears. David and Jennifer added their congratulations, and suddenly everyone was talking at once, asking questions and offering support. The anxiety that had filled the room moments before evaporated, replaced by warmth and love. I watched Marcus in the center of his family being hugged and celebrated and felt my own eyes getting damp. This was what coming out could be, not a loss but a homecoming, not rejection but acceptance. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marcus and I sat on the back porch again, wrapped in blankets against the cold. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. For what? For being here, for giving me the courage to do this. I don't think I could have without you. You're stronger than you think, I said, but I'm glad I could be here. Marcus leaned his head on my shoulder. My mom knew. I can't believe she knew. Moms usually do. What about your family? When are you going to tell them about us? Tomorrow, actually. I'm going to call my sister and then my parents. I paused. Is that okay, telling people? It's more than okay. I want people to know. I want the world to know. He lifted his head to look at me, and even in the darkness I could see the love in his eyes. I'm done hiding, Jamie. I'm done being someone I'm not. I just want to be me with you. I kissed him, soft and sweet, and felt something settle into place in my chest. This was right. We were right. Merry Christmas, Marcus, I whispered against his lips. Merry Christmas, Jamie. Winter melted into spring, and with it came changes that transformed both our apartment and our lives. What had started as a tentative exploration became something deeper, more certain. Marcus and I stopped pretending that the boundaries we'd set, separate bedrooms, distinct spaces, made any sense when we fell asleep together most nights anyway. We should probably just admit that you've moved into my room, I said one morning, watching Marcus rummage through his closet for a shirt while wearing yesterday's jeans. He paused, holding up two options, blue or gray. Blue, and don't change the subject. I'm just okay. You're right, this is ridiculous. Half my clothes are in your room anyway. He pulled on the blue shirt and came over to where I was sitting on his bed. Should we make it official, turn one of these rooms into an office or something? Or we could keep both bedrooms, I suggested. Have our own spaces when we need them, but acknowledge that we're actually together. Marcus smiled and kissed me. I like the way you think. We spent that weekend reorganizing the apartment. Marcus's room became his home office with a proper desk setup and his collection of programming books finally displayed on shelves instead of stacked in boxes. My room, our room, got a bigger bed, more storage, and a reading nook by the window that quickly became our favorite spot. It feels like we're building a life, Marcus said one evening, standing in the doorway and looking at our newly arranged bedroom. We are building a life. I know, it's just, I never thought I'd have this, be this happy. I crossed to him and wrapped my arms around his waist. Get used to it, I'm not going anywhere. Marcus's coming out rippled outward from his family like concentric circles on water. He told his friends, first Daniel and Josh, who were completely unsurprised and immediately started planning to set up their gay friends with Marcus's newly single coworkers. Then his wider circle, his colleagues, his college buddies. Each conversation was its own small act of courage, and I watched him become more confident with each one. At work, he changed his relationship status on the internal directory, updated his emergency contact to me, started bringing me to company events. The reactions were universally positive, or at least no one said anything negative to his face. His company's queer employee resource group reached out to invite him to their meetings, and while Marcus was still figuring out if he wanted to engage with that community, he appreciated the gesture. It's weird, he said one night as we walked home from a dinner party hosted by one of his coworkers. I spent 30 years thinking I was one thing and now I'm something else and everyone's just fine with it. Most people are more accepting than we give them credit for, I said, and the ones who aren't, they matter less than you think. Have you dealt with much homophobia since you came out? I thought about it. Some. Mostly microaggressions, people making assumptions, asking invasive questions, using my sexuality as a punchline. But I've been lucky. I have supportive friends and family. I live in a liberal city. I work in a progressive industry. Not everyone has that. Do you ever wish you'd figured it out younger, come out earlier? Sometimes, I think about all the years I spent hiding, pretending, trying to be straight, but then I remember that everyone's journey is different. I came out when I was ready, you came out when you were ready. There's no right timeline. Marcus took my hand as we walked, and even after months together, the gesture still sent a thrill through me. I used to think coming out would be the hard part, but it's actually all the stuff after that's challenging. Figuring out how to be gay, what that means, how to navigate spaces as a queer person. You're doing great, I assured him. Better than great, you're being authentically yourself, and that's all anyone can ask. In March, Marcus suggested we host a dinner party. I want to have our friends over together as a couple. So we invited Daniel and Josh, Christine and James, a few of my coworkers from the marketing firm, and Marcus's college friend Sarah, who he'd come out to at that coffee shop months ago. We spent days planning the menu, cleaning the apartment, making everything perfect. The night of the party, I watched Marcus greet our guests, his arm casually around my waist, introducing me as his boyfriend without hesitation. The words still gave me butterflies. The evening was perfect. We cooked too much food, drank too much wine, laughed until our sides hurt. At one point, I looked around our living room at all these people, our people gathered together, and felt overwhelmingly grateful. Daniel cornered me in the kitchen while I was getting more wine. You're good for him, you know. Marcus. Yeah, I've known him for almost 10 years and I've never seen him this happy, this comfortable in his own skin. Daniel leaned against the counter. When he first told me he was dating a guy, I was surprised, not because I had any problem with it, but because Marcus has always been so controlled, so careful, but with you, he's different, more open. He's pretty great, I said, meaning it. So are you, don't screw this up, but Daniel was smiling as he said it. Later, after everyone had left and we were cleaning up, Marcus pulled me into a dance in the middle of the kitchen, humming something soft and off-key. What are you doing? I laughed. Dancing with my boyfriend, is that allowed? It's definitely allowed. We swayed together, surrounded by dirty dishes and empty wine glasses, and I thought about how much had changed in just 6 months. How this apartment had transformed from a place to live into a home. How Marcus had gone from my roommate to my person. How I'd gone from trying to outrun my past to building a future. I love you, Marcus said suddenly, the words quiet but clear. I pulled back to look at him, my heart in my throat. What? I love you, Jamie. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I was waiting for the right moment. And then I realized that this, he gestured around the messy kitchen, this is the right moment because every moment with you is right. That's incredibly cheesy, I said, but my voice was thick with emotion. I know, do you mind? Not even a little, I cupped his face in my hands. I love you too, Marcus, so much. We kissed there in the kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of a perfect evening, and I felt something click into place. This was it. This was the life I'd been looking for when I'd fled Portland all those months ago, not escape but belonging, not solitude but love. Summer arrived with Pacific Northwest glory, long days, warm evenings, the city coming alive with outdoor concerts and street fairs and endless possibilities. Marcus and I fell into new rhythms, building traditions that were ours alone. Saturday mornings at the farmers market, Sunday hikes in the mountains outside the city, weeknight bike rides along the waterfront. We took a trip to Portland so Marcus could meet my family properly as my boyfriend, not just my roommate. My sister immediately loved him, and my parents, though initially cautious, warmed up quickly when they saw how happy I was. He's good for you, my mom said, pulling me aside while Marcus and my dad argued about baseball in the living room. You're more yourself than I've seen you in years. I am myself, I agreed, for the first time in a long time. In August, we went camping, just the two of us, deep in the Cascade Mountains where the only sounds were wind through the trees and the crackle of our campfire. We spent 3 days hiking, swimming in alpine lakes, and lying under more stars than seemed possible. I was thinking, Marcus said one night as we lay in our tent, zipped into our sleeping bag together. Our lease is up in a few months. I know. We should renew it or find a new place together, something that's ours from the start, not just a space we fell into. I propped myself up on my elbow to look at him. You want to keep living together. I want to keep living with you specifically, and I want to do it intentionally this time. not as roommates who happen to fall in love but as partners choosing to build a life together. That sounds perfect, I said, kissing him, absolutely perfect. We found a new apartment in September, a 2-bedroom in Fremont with a view of the lake and a balcony perfect for morning coffee. We signed the lease together, both of our names side by side on the document, and moved in on a crisp fall day with the help of Daniel, Josh, Christine, and James. This is it, Marcus said, standing in the empty living room of our new place. Our home. Our home, I echoed. We spent the next few weeks making the space ours, painting the bedroom a warm gray, hanging art we'd chosen together, setting up Marcus's office and my reading nook. Creating a home that reflected both of us, our combined life. One evening, after we'd finally unpacked the last box, we ordered pizza and sat on our new couch, surveying our work. You know what's funny? Marcus said. A year ago I was just looking for a roommate, someone to split rent with. I had no expectations beyond that. And instead you got a boyfriend and a whole new understanding of yourself. Instead I got you, he corrected, which was so much better than I could have imagined. Even with all the confusion and the fear and the awkwardness. Especially with all of that, because it led us here. He took my hand, threading our fingers together in the gesture that had become our signature. I never expected this, Jamie, never expected you, but now I can't imagine my life any other way. Good, I said, leaning in to kiss him, because you're stuck with me. I'm counting on it. Outside, the Seattle sky was doing its thing, clouds rolling in, the promise of rain in the air. But inside our apartment, everything was warm and bright and full of love. We'd built this together, from the unexpected foundation of a roommate search to something real and lasting and true. I thought about where I'd been a year ago, lost, heartbroken, running from a life that didn't fit. And I thought about where I was now, found, loved, running toward a future I couldn't wait to discover. Hey Marcus, I said. Yes. Thank you for taking a chance on me, for being brave enough to be yourself, for loving me. Marcus smiled, that beautiful smile that had first caught my attention all those months ago. Thank you for seeing me, for being patient while I figured things out, for making me believe that happily ever after is actually possible. It is possible, I said, we're living proof. And as we sat there together in our home, in our life, I knew it was true. This unexpected love story born from a simple roommate search had changed everything. It had changed us both, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. The October air was crisp and perfect as Marcus and I walked hand in hand through the Pike Place Market, picking out vegetables for the dinner party we were hosting that night. It had become a tradition. The first Saturday of every month, we invited friends over, cooked too much food, and celebrated the life we'd built together. We need more garlic, Marcus said, stopping at one of the produce stands. We always need more garlic, you put it in everything. And you love it. I do, I admitted, smiling. As Marcus haggled good-naturedly with the vendor, I took a moment to just watch him. He was so comfortable now, so at ease in his skin. The nervous, careful man I'd met in that coffee shop almost 2 years ago had transformed into someone confident and open. He'd cut his hair shorter, started dressing more casually, joined a queer running group. He'd become himself in the fullest sense of the word. And I'd changed too. I'd stopped running from my past and started building a future. I'd learned that love didn't have to be complicated or painful, that it could be simple and joyful and easy. I'd found home not in a place but in a person. Earth to Jamie, Marcus said, waving his hand in front of my face. Where'd you go? Just thinking about how much has changed. Good changes. The best changes. We finished our shopping and headed back to our apartment, where we spent the afternoon cooking and laughing and stealing kisses between chopping vegetables and stirring pots. Our friends arrived right on time, Daniel and Josh, Christine and James, Sarah and her new girlfriend, a few coworkers and neighbors who'd become friends. After dinner, as everyone sat around the living room talking and laughing, Christine pulled me aside. Jamie, can I talk to you for a second? Of course. We stepped out onto the balcony, where the city lights twinkled below us. I wanted to thank you, Christine said, for Marcus, for what you've done for him. I didn't do anything, he did all the hard work himself. Maybe, but you gave him the courage to do it. Before you, he was so closed off, so afraid to be vulnerable, and now he's happy, really, truly happy, and that's because of you. I felt my eyes getting damp. He makes me happy too, happier than I ever thought possible. Christine hugged me tight. I'm glad you found each other, your family now, you have been since that first Thanksgiving, but now it's official. When we went back inside, Marcus caught my eye across the room and smiled. That private smile that was just for me, that said, I love you and you're my home and this is our life all at once. Later that night, after everyone had left and we'd cleaned up, we lay in bed together, Marcus's head on my chest and my fingers running through his hair. Best Saturday, he asked, our running game. Top 10 for sure, you. Definitely top 5, having everyone here, seeing our friends happy, being with you, yeah, top 5. I kissed the top of his head, I love our life. Me too, he was quiet for a moment. Jamie, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? That night you answered my message about the apartment. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd chosen someone else? I thought about it seriously, giving the question the weight it deserved. No, not even for a second. Every choice I've made, every path I've taken led me to you, and I wouldn't change any of it. Marcus lifted his head to look at me, even when I was being an oblivious idiot who didn't realize he was gay. Especially then, because watching you discover yourself, seeing you become who you really are, that's been one of the greatest privileges of my life. You're going to make me cry. Good, I like you emotional. Marcus laughed and kissed me, and we stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, safe in the home we'd built. I thought about that day almost 2 years ago when I'd walked into an empty apartment and felt hope for the first time in months. I'd been looking for a fresh start, a new beginning. I'd found that and so much more. I'd found love in the most unexpected place with the most unexpected person. I'd found home not in a city or an apartment, but in the arms of someone who saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. And Marcus, brilliant, careful, loving Marcus, had found himself, had discovered that the life he'd been living was just a rehearsal for the real thing, and that the real thing was so much better than he'd ever imagined. Hey Jamie, Marcus murmured, half asleep against my chest. Yes. Thanks for being my roommate. I smiled in the darkness, thanks for being mine. Outside, rain had started to fall, soft, steady, the kind of rain that made you grateful to be inside, warm and safe and loved. And inside our apartment, in our bed, in our life, everything was exactly as it should be. We'd started with a simple roommate search, we'd ended with everything. And really, what more could anyone ask for?